AOC told security to remove John Kennedy. Then he did this. The air inside the grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis buzzed with anticipation. A sea of faces illuminated by the soft glow of chandeliers and the sharp beams of stage lights. Hundreds had gathered for the Education Reform Summit, a high-profile event aimed at tackling disparities in America's school systems. At the center of the stage stood Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, known to most as AOC, her voice ringing with conviction as she addressed the crowd. Her navy blazer hugged her shoulders, and her expressive hands punctuated every word, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the audience. Education is the foundation of opportunity, she declared, her tone fierce yet hopeful. But for too many kids, especially in underserved communities, it's a promise unfulfilled. We're here to change that, to demand equity, to build a system that lifts every child, no matter their zip code. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of energy rippling through the room. Teachers in the front rows clapped fervently, their lanyards swinging, while students in the back held up signs reading, "Fund Our Future." Cameras from MSNBC and local news zoomed in, capturing AOC's intensity, her dark eyes scanning the audience as if inviting each person into her mission. The room felt alive, united in purpose, and for a moment it seemed nothing could derail the momentum. Then, from the press area near the side of the stage, a figure emerged, unscripted and unexpected. Senator John Neely Kennedy, with his trademark, rumpled suit and easy Louisiana smile, stepped into the aisle, his presence as startling as a sudden chord in a quiet song. Whispers spread like wildfire. Heads turned and phones were raised, their screens glinting in the dim light. AOC paused mid-sentence, her brow furrowing as she registered the interruption. The crowd's energy shifted curiosity, mingling with confusion. Kennedy, unfazed by the hundreds of eyes now fixed on him, raised a hand in a casual wave as if he'd just strolled into a neighborhood diner. "Representative," he began, his deep voice carrying a folksy drawl that cut through the room's hum. "I couldn't help but overhear your passion for equity. Mind if I add a word or two?" His tone was almost playful, but there was a glint in his eye that suggested he knew exactly what he was doing. The audience stirred, some chuckling at his audacity, others murmuring in disapproval. A young woman in a red scarf whispered to hear a friend, who let him in, while a man in a tweed jacket leaned forward. Intrigued, AOC's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line. She gripped its podium, her knuckles whitening for a split second before she regained her composure. "Senator Kennedy," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel. "This is a forum for solutions, not surprises. You're not on the program." Her words drew a smattering of applause, mostly from her supporters clustered near the stage, their faces a mix of admiration and defiance. But Kennedy didn't flinch. He took a small step forward, still in the aisle, his hands now clasped in front of him like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. "I don't mean to ruffle feathers," he said, his smile unwavering. "But when I hear talk of fixing schools, I think folks deserve to hear all sides. Don't you?" The question hung in the air, and the room seemed to hold its breath. A few audience members nodded, instinctively drawn in by his charm, while others shook their heads, sensing a challenge to AOC's authority. The tension was palpable. A tightrope stretched across the ballroom. AOC leaned into the microphone, her gaze locked on Kennedy. "Senator, if you have ideas, there's a process. Sign up, get on the list like everyone else. This isn't a free-for-all." Her voice was sharp, cutting through the murmurs, and the crowd responded with louder applause, especially from a group of teachers waving signs that read "AOC for Equity." But the mood was fracturing. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt stood up, calling out, "Let him speak." His voice was drowned out by a woman near the stage who shouted, "No, stick to the program." The room was teetering on the edge of chaos, and AOC, sensing the need to regain control, signaled tough security teams stationed at the room's edges. Two guards in crisp black suits moved swiftly toward Kennedy, their earpieces glinting under the lights. The crowd buzzed, phones still raised, capturing every second of the unfolding drama. Kennedy, standing calmly in the aisle, seemed almost amazed by the approaching guards. His face, lined with the wrinkles of a seasoned politician, wore a jump, as if he'd faced far worse than a pair of security officers. He raised both hands, not in surrender, but as if asking the world to pause. "Now hold on, folks," he said, his voice warm and steady, like he was addressing a backyard barbecue. "I'm not here to talk as a scene. I just want 1 minute. 1 minute, to say something about the kids we're all here for." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that silenced the room for a moment. A few audience members clapped, and a guy in a baseball cap near the back yelled, "Give him a chance." But others weren't convinced. A young activist in a denim jacket stood up, her voice sharp. "This is AOC's event. Get him out." The divide was clear, and the guards hesitated, their eyes flicking between AOC and Kennedy, waiting for a final directive. AOC, still at the podium, felt that pressure mounting. She was no stranger to handling disruptions. Her years in politics and activism had taught her how to navigate tough crowds. But Kennedy's boldness was a different kind of challenge. His folksy demeanor, that coffee-sipping charm, was disarming, and she could sense part of the audience leaning toward him. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. Refusing him outright might make her seem unwilling to engage a perception she couldn't afford. After a moment's pause, she nodded, her expression icy but resolute. "Fine, Senator," she said, her voice cutting through the noise. "1 minute, make it count, and don't waste our time." She stepped back slightly, signaling the guards to stand down. The security team froze their hands, hovering near their radios, and the crowd let out a collective exhale. Phones, still cording, waiting for what would come next. Kennedy nodded in thanks, his mull softening as he took another step forward, the stage lights catching his gray hair and casting a faint glow around him. He stood in the aisle, not on the stage, but the room's attention was his. "Thank you, Representative Hesed," his voice sincere, almost humble. "I won't overstay my welcome." The crowd grew quiet, a hush falling over the ballroom as all eyes fixed on him. Even AOC's supporters, though wary, leaned forward, curious, despotic. The cameras adjusted their focus, and a local news reporter in the corner whispered to a colleague, "This is going viral. Mark my words." Kennedy cleared his throat, his hands now in his pockets, and began to speak, his voice rising and falling with the cadence of a Southern storyteller. "I grew up in a small town," he said, "where the school was the heart of everything. We didn't have much, but we had teachers who cared, neighbors who looked out for each other. I'm here because I believe every kid deserves a chance, no matter where they're from." His words were simple, but they struck a chord. An older woman in a floral dress nodded, her hands clasped in her lap, while a college student in the back whispered to his friend, Kennedy continued his tone, growing more earnest. "We're all here for the same reason, to make schools better, but we won't get there by shutting each other out. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I'm asking for a seat at the table. Just like you." He glanced at AOC, then back at the crowd, his eyes sweeping the room as if inviting everyone to join him. The applause started slowly, a few claps from the center of the room, then spread, growing louder as more joined in. Not everyone was convinced. A group near the stage sat with arms crossed, their loyalty to Okmista, but Kennedy had shifted the atmosphere. Even the skeptics couldn't deny his charisma. AOC, watching from the podium, felt the stage slipping from her grasp. She kept her face composed, but her mind was racing. Kennedy's minute wasn't just a speech, it was a performance calculated to win hearts. She knew she had to claim the room, but the crowd's reaction told her it wouldn't be easy. A young teacher in the front row stood up clapping for Kennedy, then caught herself glancing at AOC with a sheepish look. The applause grew, and a man in a suit near the aisle called out, "That's right, let's talk." But another voice closer to the stage countered, "AOC, keep going." The room was a mosaic of opinions, and Kennedy, still standing in the aisle, seemed to savor the moment. Funding access equity, not just words. Her supporters clapped, their energy returning, but it was clear Kennedy's brief moment had left a mark. The crowd was still buzzing, some chanting AOC, while others murmured Kennedy's name. The ballroom, once united in purpose, now felt like a battleground of ideas with Kennedy's unexpected arrival as he stood there, hands back in his pockets, his presence a quiet challenge. AOC's command. The stage was set for a clash, not just of policies, but opportunities, and the audience, both in the room and watching through countless phone screens, knew they were witnessing something unforgettable. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis was still crackling with energy, the echoes of Senator John Kennedy's unexpected minute-long speech lingering like the afterglow of the crowd, a patchwork of teachers, students, activists, and local reporters, buzzed with a mix of excitement and division. Some clapped their hands, still warm from applauding Kennedy's folksy call for a seat at the table, while others sat with arms crossed, their loyalty to Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez unwavering. AOC stood at the podium, her navy blue, the stage lights, her expression, a careful mask of composure. She'd just allowed Kennedy his minute, a decision she knew carried risks. And now the room felt different, less hers, more a shared space where Kennedy's presence loomed large. The cameras from MSNBC to local news stations panned between her and Kennedy, who stood calmly in the aisle, his rumpled suit and easy smile making him look like he'd just wandered in from a small-town porch. The air was thick with anticipation, and everyone, audience, reporters, even the security guards hovering at the edges, knew the next moments would shape the summit's narrative. Kennedy, sensing the crowd's pulse, didn't rush to speak again. He let the applause fade, his hands in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but deliberate. Then, with a slight tilt of his head, he spoke, his voice carrying that same Southern cadence that had already won over part of the room. "Representative, I'm grateful for that minute," he said, nodding toward AOC with a sincerity that felt almost disarming, "and I don't plan to overstay my welcome. But let me tell you a quick story." The crowd leaned in, some out of curiosity, others with skepticism. A young man in a hoodie, Nurthback whispered to his friend, This guy's got guts. Kennedy continued Histon warm like he was sharing a memory over coffee. Back in my hometown, I owned a little schoolhouse, nothing fancy. One teacher, Miss Clara, taught us all rich. Poor didn't matter. She'd say, you don't learn by talking over each other. You learn by listening. That stuck with me. He paused, his eye sweeping the room, walking with a teacher in the front row, then a student in the back. We're here to fix schools right. Well, I think Miss Clara would say, we start by giving each other a chance to be heard. The words were simple, but they landed like a well-aimed dart. Applause broke out louder this time, spreading from the center of the room to the edges. A middle-aged woman in a cardigan stood up, clapping with a smile, her eyes bright with agreement. A group of college students originally there to support AOC exchanged glances, one muttering, he's kind of making sense. Even some IVOCC's supporters, though hesitant, couldn't help but nod at the sentiment. Kennedy's story wasn't just a story. It was a bridge connecting his small-town roots to the urban crowd, making the idea of listening feel universal. That cameras caught every moment, zooming in on his weathered face, his twinkling eyes, and the crowd's shifting mood. A local reporter typed rapidly on her laptop, her screen flashing with a draft headline, Kennedy wins, Hearts at Education Summit. AOC, still at the podium, felt the room tilting toward Kennedy. Her hands rested lightly on the podium's edge, but her mind was racing. She'd seen charismatic politicians before, but Kennedy's ability to turn interjection into a moment of connection was something else. She stepped closer to the microphone, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the fatiguing applause. Senator, stories are nice, she said, her tone measured but sharp. But the kids in underfunded schools need more than anecdotes. They need funding, resources, real change, not just a seat at the table, but a system that works for them. Her words sparked a wave of applause, especially from her core supporters near the stage, who waved signs reading, Equity Now. A young teacher in glasses stood up, shouting, that's right, AOC. The room was splitting again, one side drawn to Kennedy's charm, the other rallying behind AOC's call for action. The security guard, still lingering near the aisle, exchanged glances, unsure if they'd need to step in again. Kennedy, unfazed, tilted his head as if weighing AOC's words. Then he chuckled softly, a sound that carried through the room speakers and drew a few laughs from the crowd. Representative, you're right. Kids need more than stories, he said, his voice steady but warm. But let me tell you, I've met folks across this country, teachers working 2 jobs, parents scraping by, who want to know someone's listening. They don't care about who's got the loudest mic, they want a conversation. He spread his hands as if inviting the entire room to join him. I'm not here to fight you, Representative, I'm here to say, let's talk. Really talk about what The crowd erupted again, the applause louder than before now, including some who'd been on the fence. A man in a denim jacket near the back stood up, his voice booming. He's got a point. Let's talk. A woman in a business suit nodded, whispering to her colleague, I didn't expect to agree with him. The shift was undeniable. Kennedy's charism was like a tide pulling even the skeptical toward him. His stories, rooted in a world of small-town simplicity, resonated in a room filled with urban educators and activists. A group of high school students in the corner holding signs for AOC began whispering among themselves, one saying, I mean, he's not wrong about listening. The cameras captured it all, the crowd's reactions, Kennedy's easy confidence and AOC's controlled intensity. A reporter from a local news station texted her editor, Kennedy's stealing the show. Meanwhile, phones across the room were already uploading clips of his speech to social media. A 30-second video posted by an account called NYC Truthler showed Kennedy's Miss Clara story with the caption, Senator Kennedy just dropped a truth bomb at AOC's summit. Within minutes, the clip had thousands of views, comments flooding in. This guy's reality got outplayed, and even I'm a Dem, but he's got me thinking. AOC, sensing the crowd's drift, stepped forward again, her voice rising with resolve. Senator, I hear you on listening, she said, her eyes locked on him. But let's be clear, the system isn't broken because people aren't talking. It's broken because resources aren't reaching the kids who need them most. Black, brown, low-income communities left behind for decades. Her words were like a rallying cry, reigniting her supporters. A group near the stage stood up, clapping fiercely, one shouting, Tell it, AOC. The applause was strong, but it couldn't quite drown out the murmurs of Kennedy's name from the back. Al continued, her tone unwavering. We're not here to swap stories. We're here to demand accountability, to push for policies that close the gap. That's what these kids deserve. Her supporters roared, and for a moment, she reclaimed the room's energy, her passion cutting through Kennedy's charm like a blade. But Kennedy wasn't done. He took a small step forward, still keeping his distance from the stage, his smile subtle but confident. Representative, I don't disagree, he said, his voice low but clear, picked up by a nearby microphone. Those kids deserve everything we can give them. But I've learned something from years of talking to folks. Change starts when we stop shouting and start sharing. I'm not our opponent here. I'm just asking for a chance to work together. The crowd responded with another wave of applause, this time from a broader swath of the audience, including some who'd clapped for AOC moments before. A Railroad principal in the third row stood up, her voice carrying, "He's right. Let's find ground." The room was a cacophony of cheers and countercheers, with chants of AOC mixing with calls of Kennedy. The security guards, now little more than spectators, stood back, their role overshadowed by the unfolding drama. The social media frenzy was growing by the second. The NYC Truth Teller clip had now hit 20,000 views, with comments ranging from Kennedy's legend to AOC's still fake. Another video posted by a student in the audience showed Kennedy's Let's Talk line with text overlay. "When you crash a summit and win the crowd." The hashtag #Kennedy at AOC Summit began trending, and news outlets were already drafting stories. A local reporter whispered to a colleague, "This is bigger than the summit itself." Back in the ballroom, Kennedy stood in the aisle, his presence commanding Despotatus' understated demeanor. He didn't need the stage. His words, his stories, had made the aisle his platform. AOCO, though, was far from defeated. She gripped the podium, her eyes scanning the crowd, searching for a way to pull the focus back to her mission. She knew Kennedy's charm was a challenge, but she also knew her own strength, her ability to speak truth top hour, to rally those who believed in her vision. As the applause for Kennedy began to fade, AOC leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but charged with purpose. "Senator, I appreciate your call for conversation," she said, her words deliberate, "but let's not confuse talking with doing. The kids' ethnicity in this country need us to act now." Her supporters erupted their applause, a reminder of her hold on theorem, even in the face of Kennedy's unexpected rise. The crowd was split, a living reflection of a divided nation, and the summit, meant to be a focused discussion on education, had become something else entirely. A stage for two contrasting visions of leadership. Kennedy, with his disarming charm, had turned a near ejection into a moment of conviction, but AOC, with her unrelenting focus, was determined to keep the fight for equity front and center. The ballroom, alive with tension and possibility, waited for what would come next. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis hummed with a restless energy. The clash between Senator John Kennedy and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the audience in a state of electrified division. The chandeliers cast a soft glow over the crowd, but the atmosphere was anything but calm. Applause for Kennedy's folksy call for conversation still lingered, mingling with the fervent cheers for AOC's impassioned demand for action. The room was a mosaic of reactions. Teachers nodding thoughtfully, students whispering heatedly, and reporters typing furiously, their screens aglow with draft headlines. AOC stood at the podium, her navy blazer sharp under the stage lights, her eye scanning the crowd as she tried to steer the education reform summit back to its purpose. Kennedy, still in the aisle, his rumpled suit and easy smile unshaken, had become an undeniable force, his brief speech turning a near ejection into a verapamament. The security guards, now relegated to the sidelines, stood with arms crossed, their role diminished, wide crowds focus on the two figures commanding the room. Outside the ballroom, the world was already reacting. Clips of Kennedy's words spread like wildfire across social media, and the summit, meant to address school inequities, had become a stage for a broader cultural showdown. As AOC prepared to resume her speech, the crowd's divide was palpable. A group of activists near the stage, waving signs, reading equity, now chanted AOC, AOC. Their voices a defiant reminder of her mission. But in the back, a cluster of audience members, swayed by Kennedy's charm, murmured his name, some even clapping. As he nodded graciously to a Patora, a middle-aged man in a flannel shirt stood up, his voice cutting through the noise. "Let's hear both sides," he called, drawing a mix of cheers and boos. A young woman in a beanie near him shook her head, muttering, "This is her event." The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter with every shout. AOC, sensing the need to reclaim control, leaned into the microphone, her voice steady but charged. "We're here for the kids," she said, her words slicing through the chaos. "Not for debates, not for stories, but for solutions. Real policies to fund schools, hire teachers, and close thagaps that leave our most vulnerable behind." Her supporters erupted their applause, drowning out the murmurs. And for a moment, she held the room again. A teacher in the front row, her lanyard swinging, stood up, shouting, "That's why we're here." But the moment was fleeting. Phones across the ballroom glowed with notifications as Kennedy's clip, posted by NYC Truffler, surged past 50,000 views. Comments poured in. "Kennedy's got my vote. AOC's fighting for us, but he's got a point, and this is real politics." Another video uploaded by a student showed Kennedy's Let's Talk line with a caption, "When you crash a summit and steal the show." The hashtag Kennedy at Oak Summit was trending, and news outlets were scrambling to keep up. A local reporter whispered to a colleague, "This is going national." Back in the room, Kennedy stood quietly, his hands in his pockets, his smile subtle. We could do an interview. Set the record straight. AOC turned her gazer. The record is straight. Those kids need us to act, not posture. Schedule a community meeting for next week. That's where the work happens. Her resolve was unshaken, but the weight of the moment was clear. She knew Kennedy's charm had shifted the spotlight, and while she wouldn't chase it, she felt the sting of losing the room's focus. Meanwhile, Kennedy was making his way toward the ballroom's exit, his aide, Tom, at his side. A small group of audience members followed, some shaking his hand, others snapping photos. A woman in a green coat, a teacher from Brooklyn, approached. "Senator, I don't usually agree with you, but you're right about listening," she said, her voice earnest. Kennedy smiled, high eyes crinkling. "Thank you, ma'am. If we start there, we might surprise ourselves." Tom, holding a phone, grinned as he read aloud a comment from the viral clip. "Kennedy's like your grandpa who wins every argument." Kennedy chuckled, shaking his head. "I just said what I thought he said," his voice as calm as ever. But Tom was the modesty, you flipped the whole room. "Senator, this is blowing up." As they reached the lobby, a reporter from a local station, microphone in hand, intercepted them. "Senator, your speech is everywhere online. What's your take on the reaction?" Kennedy shrugged his hands back in his pockets. "Folks want to feel heard. If they liked what I said, I'm glad. If not, I'll keep talking." His words, simple and unpretentious, were already being quoted across news sites. Outside of Marriott, the conversation was spilling into the streets. At a coffee shop across from Times Square, a group of summit attendees debated over lattes. A young man in glasses shared Kennedy's. On his phone, "I came for AOC, but this guy's got a point," he said. Hisfrene, a woman in a scarf, frowned. "AOC's fighting for real change. Kennedy's just good at talking." Their table reflected the broader divide as people grappled with the summit's unexpected turn. On social media, the battle raged on. A post from a political blogger read, "Kennedy turned AOC's summit into his stage, but she's still won with the plan." Comments were split, with some praising Kennedy's class and others defending AOC's fire. A TikTok video splicing Kennedy's speech with dramatic music hit 80,000 likes with text overlay. "When you get kicked out but win the internet." The digital storm was relentless, and Kennedy's moment was dominating the narrative even as AOC's supporters fought to keep her message alive. Back in the ballroom, AOC was pushing forward, her voice rising, as she detailed a proposal for increased school funding. "We need to invest in teachers and classrooms and programs that give every child a shot," she said, her passion undimed. Her supporters clapped, but the room's energy was scattered. Some still distracted by their phones, others whispering about Kennedy. A group of students in the back, originally there for AOC, were now debating among themselves. "I love AOC, but Kennedy's right. We need to talk across lines," one said. Her friend shook her head. "Talk's cheap. AOC's got the plan." The divide wasn't just ideological, it was emotional. A tug-of-war between Kennedy's call for connection and AOC's demand for justice. The cameras, still rolling, captured the split, panning from out face to the empty aisle where Kennedy had stood, his absence as powerful as his presence. In the lobby, Kennedy paused to speak with a small group of supporters, his aide fielding calls from news outlets. A man in a leather jacket, a retired principal, shook Kennedy's hand. "You said what we're all thinking," he said. "We're too divided." Kennedy nodded, his smile warm. "If we can't talk, we can't fix anything," he replied. His words, overheard by a passing reporter, were tweeted out minutes later, racking up thousands of likes. Backstage, AOC's team was planning their next move, but AOC herself was already looking ahead. "The work doesn't stop," she told Maria, her voice resolute. "We keep going for the kids, for the communities." Her focus was unshaken, but the summit's narrative was no longer hers alone. Kennedy's brief appearance had sparked a ripple effect, dividing the crowd, igniting social media, and turning a policy forum into a moment. The question now was how the two would navigate the storm they'd unleashed, and whether the summit's original mission could rise above the noise. The grand ballroom of the New York Marriott Marquis was beginning to empty, casting long shadows across the now quieter space. The Education Reform Summit, meant to be a beacon for change in America's schools, had transformed into an unexpected clash of ideals, with Senator John Kennedy's brief charismatic intervention stealing the spotlight from Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's fiery call for equity. The crowd, a mix of educators, students, and activists, filed out their voices. A low hum of debate, some still clutching signs, reading equity. Now others checking their phones for the latest social media updates. Out still at the podium concluded her speech with a resolute nod, her navy blazer slightly creased from the intensity of the event. "We keep fighting for every child, every classroom, every community," she said, her voice steady. sparking a final wave of applause from her supporters. Kennedy, now in the lobby, was surrounded by a small group of admirers. His rumpled suit and easy smile as potent as ever. The summit was over, but its impact was just beginning, rippling through news feeds, coffee shop conversations, and the minds of those who'd witnessed it. The clash had left a mark not just on the attendees but on a broader audience online, and it carried a deeper lesson, one about the power of dialogue and the persistence of purpose in a divided world. In the lobby, Kennedy shook hands with a retiring principal, a man in a worn corduroy jacket who had been moved by his words. "Senator, you got folks thinking," he said, his voice gruff but sincere. "We need more of that." Kennedy nodded, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "If we can just talk to each other, we'll find a way," he replied, his folksy tone as natural as breathing. A young woman, a college student, with a backpack slung over one shoulder, approached her phone. In hand, "Your speech is all over my feed," she said, her eyes wide. People's saying, "You changed the game." Kennedy chuckled, his hands slipping into his pockets. "Little lady, I just stayed what I thought. If it's resonating, that's up to the folks out there." High-Sade Tom stood nearby, fielding calls from news outlets, eager for a soundbite. A reporter from a local station caught Kennedy before he could leave microphone extended. "Senator, your moment at the summit's gone viral. What you hope people take from it?" Kennedy paused, his smile softening. "I hope they see we can disagree without shutting each other out. That's how we fix things." His words, quoted across news sites within the hour, cemented his image as a bridge builder, a unifier in a polarized age. Backstage, AOC sat in Asmol office, the glow of Times Square filtering through the window. Her team buzzed around her laptops, open phones pinging with notifications. Maria, her aide, scrolled through a flood of social media posts, her brow furrowed. "They're calling Kennedy the voice of reason," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "We need to push back. Maybe a video recapping your speech." AOC, her hands clasped, shook her head. "The work isn't on those screens," she said, her tone firm but calm. "It's in the schools, the communities, the kids who need us. Let's focus on the next steps, meetings, proposals, action." Jamal, another aide, nodded, jotting down notes. "I'll set up a town hall in the Bronx next week," he said. "We'll keep the momentum going." AOC's resolve was unshaken, her focus laser sharp on the mission that had brought her to the summit. She knew the narrative had shifted with Kennedy's moment dominating the headlines, but she also knew her work wasn't about fleeting applause. A text from her sister lit up her phone. "You were amazing, but Kennedy's getting all the buzz. Keep going." AOC smiled faintly, setting the phone down. "I'm not here for the buzz," she told Maria. "I'm here for the kids who don't have a voice." Outside, the conversation was everywhere. At a diner a block from the Marriott, a group of summit attendees settled over coffee, their table littered with napkins and phones. A young teacher in a sweater shared Kennedy's clip, now at 100,000 views. "I'm with AOC all the way, but he made me think," she said. "Maybe we do need to listen more." Her colleague, a man in a tie, shook his head. "AOC's got Zeppelin funding equity, real change. Kennedy's just a good talker." Beardbait mirrored the online frenzy where the hashtag had Kennedy at AOC.summit trended alongside #AOI for equity. A TikTok video splicing Kennedy's "Let's Talk" line with AOC's call for action had 150,000 likes with comments like "Both are right in their own way. AOC's the fighter, Kennedy's charmer." News outlets weighed in with the local paper running the headline, "Kennedy steals AOC's summit, but she holds firm." A political analyst on a cable show called it a masterclass. In contrast, Kennedy's warmth versus AOC's urgency. The summit had become a microcosm of America's divide, with each figure embodying a different path forward. Kennedy, now in a black SUV, leaving the Marriott, leaned back in his seat, his aide reading comments aloud. "They're saying you're the king of dialogue," Tom said, grinning. Kennedy shrugged, his smile faint. "I just wanted folks to think about listening. If they're talking about it, that's enough for me." But the impact was undeniable. His social media post, a simple, "Thanks New York for giving me a minute. Let's keep talking," had tens of thousands of shares, reinforcing his image as a unifier. He declined a TV appearance, but agreed to a radio interview where he said, "We're all trying to help kids. If you start by hearing each other, we'll get somewhere." His words, quoted widely, kept the spotlight on